Could you please pronounce your name correctly for me?
Howard Greenberg.
And Howard, you are now what's your official title? Professor, associate professor? What's your I know we love our titles.
We don't have titles. We don't have titles, we don't have tenure, and I'm just the chair of the program, which I think in the case of our MFA program is a little different than other program chairs, or program chairs at other institutions where, you know, the chair rotates among faculty. Mine is my involvement as chair is more intricate and organizational. So, I can't tell you when I became chair, but it's been over 10 years. So,
Yeah, well, give me a little bit of background. Let's go back a step. So, like, I when I was in school, I remember the venerated, like the amazing Maine photographic workshops, and they have now evolved into a college and an MFA program and all this other stuff. So, give me a little bit of background on sort of what has evolved over the past, well, 25 years.
well, the workshops actually, started in 1973. I think I have that right. As an institution, we're almost 50 years old. But it was started as a for-profit school, primarily focused on, training for the professions of photography first, and then filmmaking was added. I think the previous owner of the school, because it was a sole proprietorship, was approached by the University of Maine, and I can't tell you when this was, to teach the art or photographic and filmmaking courses for an associate's degree program. So it was really under the University of Maine's auspices that their students were taking classes in photography and filmmaking, and they were attending classes in general studies at the university. So, and then the former owner thought, well, we could do this ourselves, right? And it was interesting because they developed general studies classes that were related to art practices. I was teaching in that program when it existed, and I taught aesthetics class, and it was analytical aesthetics. So it was philosophy, right? So it was
Mhm.
a general studies thing, but it was focused on the interests of the students. The MFA program then started in 1996. The first students were admitted in 1996. And so we had to develop a name for the college because our identity up until that point had been as a workshops center. So Rockport College was born, and that's what it was called for some years until there were some financial struggles, and a board of directors formed a nonprofit and took over the governance of the school. And that was in 2007. Then in 2018, we changed the name to Maine Media College, right?
Okay,
So
good. I thought I was horribly out of touch by not recognizing that name. I was like, I swear it was called Maine Photographic Workshop for a really long
it,
time.
it was. And so what we've done is we've changed it so that we're Maine Media College doing business as Maine Media Workshops and College, right? So the workshops have still been the primary revenue stream for the school, but we've developed other programs. We've expanded beyond photography and filmmaking. We have a writing program. We have book arts center. So programs have expanded substantially.
And you have been the chair of this for how long?
I think I've been chair at least 10 years, maybe 12 years, something like that. Perhaps more. I
And that's through the changes. So you were there from for profit to nonprofit to from workshops to college. So you've been part of this whole transition.
I've been here since 2000.
Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah. My wife is the provost of the school, and she's also faculty in the MFA program. Her name is Elizabeth. And when we were first married, we were living in Pennsylvania. I mean, she moved from Manhattan to Pennsylvania where I was living. So we shared a studio space, and she agreed to do this on the condition that in the summer she could come up to teach workshops here, and seemed like a pretty good arrangement to me. She's been affiliated with the school for 30 years. The first summer after we were married that she came up to teach workshops, she was offered a job. So I thought it was a great opportunity for her. And I was, burning the candle at all ends where I was, and it just felt like the right thing to do. So I came up then after we were married in 2000. So the MFA program, the first students were admitted in 96. My involvement began in 2000 as faculty. Then it was some years later that I became chair of the program.
So how big is the program these days? How many students and all that?
It's still relatively small, and we intend to grow a little bit, but not so much. Right now, there's 26 students.
I graduated from a school with only like my undergraduate only had 4 people in my photography program. In my
Right,
graduate program, I think I only graduated with 10 other students in my
right.
discipline. So I'm all for small education.
Yeah, there's about 26 students currently, 8 core faculty. We developed a category of faculty called continuing faculty. So those are recurring guests. And we have guest faculty we bring in to really, shake things up.
I was about to ask that. I'm like, so how do you find your faculty if they're sort of visiting part-timey kind of thing?
A lot of the faculty who are recurring faculty have taught workshops, right? So that's a rather extensive program. There might be 200 faculty during the workshop season. And then a lot of it is word of mouth. Somebody knows somebody. Like one of our current MFA students, when she entered the program, was shifting from a journalist or journalism background, a photojournalism background, to social practice art. I mean, that's the direction she wanted to go. So my wife and I knew somebody who is an authority in that field, if you would call it a field. So we brought him in, and he's been mentoring the student.
Yeah, I read that there was so you were talking about like mentor focused or
Mentor
mentor
based,
centered,
yeah.
mentor based. There you go. So like give us a little bit of like that's a bit unique. That's not sort of the norm in America. Of course, in Europe, the idea
Yeah.
of sort of mentor apprentice is still very strong tradition. But how do you all sort of do the mentor based process?
It's a kind of deep engagement with the student. It's conversational because this, at the master's level, we're not talking about things that are instructional per se. It's more a matter of exploring, trying to create an environment for the student where their work, where they can examine their work deeply and expansively. So it's a considerable amount of work, and I think if you're effective as a mentor, you have to have a great deal of patience, because it's much easier to tell a student what to do, and then they're successful because they do what you do, than it is to sit and listen and wait and nudge and try to get them to come to their own understandings. That said, it's richly rewarding when they do, for everybody.
If they do.
They typically do. That's why ours is like a 3-year program, and the mentors interact with their mentees every 2 weeks for at least an hour. And our semesters are long. They're not 15-week semesters. The semesters officially begin 30 days after a retreat, which a misnomer for sure, but that's when we all get together on campus, typically, were it not for COVID, right? And then the semester ends at the following retreat. So they're essentially 5 months long, the semesters. And if a student has been working with a particular mentor over the course of several semesters, they just keep going. There is no break in that interaction. So we have a 3-year window of time, and we have fairly consistent interaction between the mentors and students, which improves the chances that they'll come to a practice that's recognizably authentic to them.
Sure. I mean, I went to different schools and have now lived in Europe and the Middle East and stuff. But like one of my schools was very much of a sort of this mentor apprentice kind of a feel, which was the teachers, like you sort of chose a teacher and sort of took more of their classes than let's say anybody else's. And then I ended up going to another school, the San Francisco Art Institute, and at San Francisco they actively told us, do not work like us. We
Yeah,
are just here as teachers. You do your own thing. We're just here to guide you, and do not, like, we were not allowed to take too many courses with the same professor. They really did not want us to follow in their footsteps, kind of a thing. So like,
right.
so it sounds like you've got sort of like a nice balance of that, like a little bit of mentoring, but maybe not too much like direct mentor apprenticey kind of feel.
It's not mentor apprentice. It's probably closer to talk therapy in nature, where you reflect back what the student's telling you or what you're seeing in the work, and allowing them to come to an understanding about their work such that they can make they set their own goals and develop their practices in ways that are sustainable beyond the program. And in another way that we're different is students develop their own goals and objectives for projects with their mentors and advisor. Every student has an advisor's like a guidance counselor kind of, and the advisor would help the student select appropriate mentors. An advisor would help students in constructing projects or matching the goals, their individual goals, with the standards of the program.
What happens if like a student comes in and says, "I want to be mentored by this person," and this particular teacher says, "No, I don't want to mentor that student."
It's happened not too frequently, but we'll find a substitute.
I mean, it's tough because when I was applying for MFA programs, the advice that was always told to me was go to an MFA program not because of the reputation of the program, but because there's a particular person you want to learn from.
Right,
So,
right.
so the idea of being able to choose somebody,
Well,
saying like, "This is the person I want to
yeah,
learn from."
right. For the first semester, we assign an academic mentor and recommend a studio mentor, a studio project mentor, just for the first semester.
Okay, when you're thinking about that, like, do you? So, like, I really want to get into like the nuts and the bolts of the academic process here. So, like, do you try and find teachers that are similar to them of the students, or sort of a complementary or even an opposing style to them to try and push them more? So,
Well, since this is only for the first semester, we try to find. Well, first of all, we choose somebody who's going to be there at the retreat the following semester, most likely, right? In some instances, the best person that the faculty decides as a group for this person is not on the core faculty, just because the characteristics of a student's interest work and their interests are aligned with that individual, just doesn't happen to be on the core faculty. We might bring them in, but more often than not, it's somebody who's going to be there so they can advocate for the student, and they're most familiar with the purposes of the projects and the outcomes that we're looking for.
Okay, wait, one little question because again, I'm still trying to get past the idea of Maine Photographic Workshop and think of it as a college.
Right.
Are the students actually living there?
No, it's a low residency program. So we get together, they're in residence during these retreats, which are about a week long. At the retreats, there are critiques and group discussions, individual discussions with faculty, guest faculty make presentations, those kinds of things. Then the students have 30 days from the end of the retreat. Well, actually, it's shorter now because of student loan requirements, but reasonably, it's in that realm to propose their projects for the next semester. What are the goal? What are you going to do? What are the goals? What are the objectives? Who's the mentor? And these things are usually worked out with the mentor ahead of time. And then the advisor has to approve the proposal. I have to approve the proposal, and students work from where they are. Most often they share their work with their mentors digitally, Dropbox, YouTube, a variety of platforms. And then they talk every 2 weeks. Some talk once a week. So it's a very interactive, conversational method of, it's not really teaching, it's mentoring. That's why I said it's more like more akin to talk therapy, in that you would hope that this you're not creating a mini me of the student. You're just reflecting back and trying to support it.
It sounds like it's pretty similar to what I think of as Bard. Isn't it Bard that does the sort of type of like long distance meeting every now and then kind of stuff?
There are many what they call low residency programs or distance learning. Low residency, there is residency, period. So it's not like online. But a lot of the appeal to this kind of program is for people who can't give up whatever they're doing. They have responsibilities, either financial, familial responsibilities. They can't just up and leave for a couple of years. And
Yeah, well, like, what's the age range? I mean, so are these your stereotypical younger
no,
MFA students, or are these more
no,
more adult learners?
more adult learners who, I think the average age is about 50. And many of them have had successful careers in professions, have been working on their art practices sort of on the side for many years, and now have the ability to focus on something that's more meaningful as they transition to another point in their lives. Other students have been professional photographers, filmmakers, videographers, right, in commercial areas, and want to explore meaning in the art. And recently, we've begun to have an influx, to experience an influx of younger students. I mean, I say influx, there are a few because it's small, but it feels like an influx. That's really exciting because it's a different kind of energy they bring, and it necessarily changes some of the qualities of exchange among the students, and I think it makes the program more vibrant. So typically an older student, but it's evolving.
What about the nature of analog versus digital? Are you, because man, you all are known as the photographic
Yeah.
place. Like, I mean, so like, I assume you probably have strong like resources and equipment for both still.
Yeah, we do. We've maintained wet dark room. One of our resident faculty's chair of the photography certificate programs. We offer certificate programs, is an expert in alternative processes. So we still have those labs. If you can't come, you can do them online. And people are doing these things online now. It's
Oh yeah.
crazy. Yeah, out of necessity, we've been online because of COVID, and The class has been going great.
I was gonna say, so, like, how is that working for you? So, like, so you're running your university classes that way, and also I assume some workshops are also
All the
being run that
workshops, everything. We have the certificate programs that we had to, put online. That's a those are 1 year in residence programs, 30 weeks. Put them online. We retained 100% of the students.
Okay, wait, hold on. When you say "put online," I'm putting that in air quotes kinda
Yeah.
thing, like, you don't mean, like, YouTube or just, like, pre-prepared videos. You mean you're
No,
doing
Zoom. Just
okay.
as but the classroom is virtual. I mean, the same kind of thing, only it's virtual. All the responses have been great. I mean, there have been some who've decided not to participate online, but the vast majority of them have, and they've been really happy with the results. And the evaluations we're getting from the students have been really positive. It's made it possible for more people to participate. They don't have to travel to Maine. And because there's Zoom, and we realize that, you can't sit on Zoom for like 6 or 8 hours a day. So administrators have changed the structures. So they might meet for 2 hours and then a break, and then 2 hours, or twice a week instead of every day for a week. They'll meet twice a week for, longer stretch. So
How do you do, like, the stuff where there's light sensitive material with a Zoom tutorial? Because like, I'm picturing, like, a laptop going in the dark room or something like this, like
I'm really not the one to ask about that because I'm not even a photographer. But I know they're teaching a broad spectrum of classes. I know for the filmmaking certificate program, we sent packets of equipment to the students.
Nice.
Right? It would be equipment that they would be have access to here on campus. So sent them the equipment and worked it out that way. I don't know. I don't know what happens in a dark room. Obviously you might not take a live screen in with you, but
Yeah, no, that wouldn't work. No, not at all, yeah. Okay, one of my biggest pet peeves about academia, art academia these days is that we all do an excellent job of teaching skills, craftsmanship, analytical thought, philosophical thought, all that kind of stuff. We're good at that. We've been doing that for centuries. Where I feel like I'm letting my students down, and I feel like a lot of other schools are letting their students down, is they're not teaching enough about the business of
right,
being a creative person, be it contract law or I mean just like all the different stuff, how to invest, how in equipment, how to make the right choices of studios, size of studios, whether to create a storefronty studio or a warehouse studio, like I mean just like all of the different like business of,
right.
so like do you do anything with
Yes,
that in your program?
yes, we do. We have courses in what we call professional development, and these are prominent concerns for photographers and filmmakers. The legalities are much different or the concerns are in those areas are much different than they would be for other artists. So there are the copyright law that you mentioned, how to set up a business, how to approach galleries, all those things. Yes.
So you do help with that because my schools were not as strong when I was a student. Of course, that was, decades ago at this point, but
Mine weren't either, but yeah, the exigencies of photo-based industries require some, knowledge of that. Plus, students are interested, and we've never been like an ivory tower type of institution. Hence, the no titles, tenure, nothing fancy. And earlier on, it was problematic for the MFA program because I think our peer or people at our peer institutions looked down on us because we emerged from this workshop environment, which they saw as and a for-profit school, which they saw as highly problematic. But we were all, because we were already outside these norms of academic structure and policy, we could adapt to circumstances in ways that benefited students. And I mean, we continue to do that. At this point, we've been hearing from other schools and even the accreditors, like, you've managed to do this. How are you doing it? And of course, we did it because we had to do it. We didn't have huge endowments. Right now, we might say we're not encumbered by all the money, all the things we bought with that money. And what may have been seen as an odd amalgam of academic activities before, or sort of wild combinations, have proven to be effective. For instance, we still permit students to take, in the MFA program for graduate credit, up to 9 workshops in the workshops program. Now they have to be master's level workshops, which means they're typically not skill based. They're at a higher level, more conceptual, and well, I think more conceptual would cover it
It's a close enough word.
in a broad way of interpreting conceptual. And that also gives students access to different group of peers. Yeah.
Okay, wait. Take it back a step. So you're saying that if there's a student taking the MFA program, so instead of taking courses that are, let's say, part of the core curriculum, they have the option of taking workshops in lieu of a course or as a replacement for a course.
Right.
Nice.
We don't offer many courses. We offer what we call intensives in the MFA program, which are 1 week, Monday through Friday, all day long, introductions to academic subjects of common concern to media artists: film history, photo history, aesthetics, professional development, documentary studies, design. And these are not comprehensive classes. They're meant to be introductory and conceptual, right? That if a student wants to pursue anything further, this is where they're going to discover that. But those are the courses that we offer. The rest is all mentored projects that students and their mentors propose.
This sounds like a very, very self-driven school.
It
Like this
is
is yeah, this is not a school where you're hand holding the students and pushing them through a curriculum and all that.
not you're hand holding them, but you're deeply engaged with them, but you're not forcing a particular curriculum down their throats. And here's the problem, because we want to ensure that it remains an individualized program. That our purpose is to help students develop authentic and sustainable practices. But from an outside perspective, that might seem, from an outside academic perspective, it might seem loosey goosey. Like, what does a Maine Media College MFA graduate look like? Well, they look like themselves. What does that mean, right? So it's trying to balance. I mean, they do share characteristics, right? They do have things in common, but they're not those apparent things. Like, increasingly, students' work is diverse. We've got students doing social practice art, installation, performance, as well as more traditional photography and filmmaking.
Well, I mean, there's the old saying of like, 95% of people who graduate with MFA stop producing within 5 years of graduating. Like, it seems like
No,
your kind of an education would have a less
yes, you've hit the nail on
percentage.
the head. Actually, that's something that we are pleased about, because authentic and sustainable, we want them to be able to develop artistic practices they can run independently, and it means that they have to develop their goals not just for their art, but how they're going to engage with the world, artistically. Some, you know, the the gallery scene is great for some people, but for others, it's teaching or some other expression of their creativity in the world. And we do surveys. And let me see, we've had 53 graduates of the program. Students at a remarkably high rate stay involved with their practices. And many, many, many are successful, have national and international attention. Some of our current students do.
Are you accredited?
No, we're in the we're pursuing accreditation. It's an 8-year process.
Oh, I know. I was at a university when we went through the accreditation process, and I stayed until maybe a semester before they got it after I left, but
Right.
it is a bear of a
It,
process to
it,
get
it
accredited.
it's a huge process that we're committed to, and we're over 5 years in. So it's a three-phase process. We're through the second phase.
Who are you going with? We did NASAD.
NECHI, which used to be NEASC, the regional accreditors.
They're all just as I mean, it's I get it, and I understand the need for it. I'm all for some sort of standardization of the education process, but oh my god, the amount of paperwork. When we did our final report, it was nearly 10 inches tall of
Yeah,
just printed paper that we had to give them, and it was ridiculous.
our accreditors require that we limit the actual self-study document to 100 pages, but then
Yes.
then you have supporting documents, and I think we had about 600 pages of supporting
Yeah, the appendixes.
the appendices. So yeah, it's a lot of work. Mostly Elizabeth and I have been. Well, that's not true. There are other people on staff who and faculty who have been involved in specific aspects like
You
the
have to have them.
finance and right. But when it comes down to the actual writing of it, a great majority of that is done at our kitchen table, so that we have grooves worn into the table.
Oh, yeah, what has to have a consistent voice in the end, you can't
Yeah.
just pass it off to random people, so, yeah.
No, absolutely, and Elizabeth has a great ability to retain data, so she, she's like an encyclopedia. Just ask her first. No need to, search your desktop for anything. So
It's excellent to have one of those in the family.
yeah,
Yeah. So, sidestep, a question that because we're talking about accreditation, it sort of dawned on me, like, my part of accreditation was primarily health and safety.
nice. Mm.
It would be nice if everybody if they funded it well, and if they actually did it. It's such a long story.
No, no, I understand.
It was in the United Arab Emirates, and we were
uh,
trying to meet United States accreditation, so, like, it was just ridiculous, but so, like, do you all do all of the strong OSHA related, I guess,
yeah, you
health and
have to.
safety stuff? But
You have to.
you always have, though, for the workshops too.
Right, right. Well, I mean, we still have, the wet dark rooms and, the associated chemicals and the disposal thereof. So yeah, you would have to do that. And there's also access issues pertinent to Disabilities Act and all kinds of safety concerns.
And they're all I mean, not to downplay them, but they're all quite expensive to not only install but maintain.
Yeah.
And that's something a lot of people don't get about, like, schools. Like, there are regulations and rules that are federally mandated that are quite expensive and time
Right.
consuming to either install and or maintain to make sure they continue to function well.
Sure. Well, and since we're talking about accreditation, there are administrative salaries that are involved. If the more closely involved with the government you get, the more expensive it gets. Student loans, federally backed student loans, enable more students to participate.
Well, okay, wait, so, like, so it to if somebody wants to enroll in your school, they are eligible to get
Yes,
federally done student loans.
as of, when we attained that candidacy status, we were eligible for
That's
that.
lovely.
Yeah.
And now, do you have, in your region, like, do you have, teachers unions and all that kinda stuff?
Well, I imagine we might. We don't participate. We're Matthew. I mean, we're
You're
just
too small.
teachers
They haven't
here.
noticed you yet, that's all. Wait till you get bigger, then they'll start noticing you.
It would be interesting to investigate, what's going on, with regard to COVID and the unions, because some teachers are being asked to do things that they weren't initially hired to
Yeah,
do.
and we're not in their contract or
Exactly.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, indeed. Okay, something I totally forgot to ask, which I generally ask all my guests, is sort of how did you even get to this? So, like, what was your upbringing? Like, were your parents creative? Did you have teachers? Like, how did you get to A, being a creative person and then B, being a teacher?
When I was a kid, I went to public school,
Me too.
and up until the middle of my sophomore year in high school, I had a particularly, unflattering opinion of teachers. Most of the time, I saw that the teacher's role was to maintain order in the classroom, and that was their focus. And if that's all they accomplished, they were satisfied. When they did accomplish it. But as far as learning anything goes, it wasn't happening. And there was also a brutality about the public school experience that I had, that
Where was that?
in Pennsylvania,
Okay.
I wasn't particularly equipped for, being the sensitive kid that I was. I was smart enough to do well, but there was certainly nothing about that experience that encouraged me to learn. In fact, I was probably traumatized enough that it adversely impacted learning. And then my parents transferred me to a private school, and I suddenly became very interested in learning. And I had some teachers. I'm emotional because a teacher of mine just passed away.
I'm sorry.
I had teachers who modeled the profession differently and changed my life. I graduated from high school, class valedictorian. So my parents, thought, well, you should be a doctor or a lawyer.
Stable, made a lot of money. Yes.
Yeah, it might be partially cultural too. So, and I thought, yeah, well, like, okay, sure. But I had also, always been like the art kid. And I thought initially that it would be okay and that I could do both. And, undergraduate, at first I went to Georgetown, and, thinking I was going to be a lawyer.
I went to the Corcoran, actually. I know DC very well.
Yeah,
I grew up in Arlington.
there you go.
Loved
I,
Georgetown. Some great school.
I left because I went to the chair of the art department, and I asked, next semester, can I take some art classes? And he said, are you an art major? And I said, no. And they had an honors English program. That's what I was in. And he said, well, if you're not an art major, you can't expect to have an art class till, like, at the very earliest, your junior year.
That sounds about right at a university, yes.
After a lot of gnashing of teeth with my parents, who, like, had issues of their own by that time, it was okay that I'd go to art school. So I went to Tyler for a while, until I was in a car accident and broke my hand. And it was like the semester started on Monday. On Thursday, I broke my hand, and the dean told me, withdraw. so so then I went to Florida where my mother was living to recover, and found a school that was sort of like what at least the MFA program at Maine Media has become, and in fact, probably in no small part because of my influence. So you wrote a contract with your advisor, what you were going to do. They had courses, but you could also say, I'll, apart from my courses, I'll do this.
What school was this?
It's called New College. Again, there I had, just incredible teachers who impacted me on a number of levels as role models for engaging with learning and work, but also with other people ethically and spiritually. I finished my undergraduate career, and I had several, in air quotes, art jobs. One of which was working for someone who he would sand down the face of a rock and do calligraphy on the rocks like Jesus is Lord, and airbrush a dove or a cross, and then polyurethane it and put it on an easel, a little stand. And he advertised that he was looking for help, somebody with an art background. So I got the job thinking, I'd be designing the stencils, I was sanding down the rocks.
Absolutely. You were the
Yeah, yeah. So that wasn't much fun, and these weren't the art jobs I aspired to. And about that time, my father contacted me and said, I need you in the business, family business. And so I, flew home and started working in business, and for a long time wasn't really making art. And then I started making art again, and I was very fortunate that, I got some recognition, and I was asked to teach because of that, recognition that I had received. And I was teaching at Lafayette College, adjunct. At the same time I'm doing the family business, at the same time I'm, doing my own artwork and exhibiting it. But I fell in love with teaching, and over the years I've become more passionate about the teaching. And I also, think back to those teachers I had at the private high school that were so impactful. I didn't realize the extent to which they altered the course of my life. I think ultimately in in a very positive way. I mean, maybe had I become a lawyer by some objective measures of success, it would have been a terrible decision not to be a lawyer. But that's not really what matters to me. I'm really blessed that I'm fine. What really matters to me, my relationships with people are so meaningful that I'm encouraged, and I'm like reminded so frequently of those teachers that I had that who were so inspirational, and want to be like them.
Okay, I've got a question along that because, like, I remember the last time I applied for teaching jobs, they always asked, like, "What's your teaching philosophy?" So, like, I'm asking sort of both your teaching philosophy and also sort of in the grander scheme, sort of the MFA program's teaching
Right.
philosophy, because, like, I always went to Socratic method kind of
Right.
thing to sound really
Yeah.
pompous and all that.
Yeah. Yes. The dialectics.
Yeah.
I've got nothing so hard boiled. It's more like I see myself as providing a service, and a listener, and an interpreter, and a reframer. Because what I do is not, it's not really instructional. my teaching method is, to listen, reflect back, try to frame things in art world contexts, try to support a student's, awareness of what they're doing and what the choices they seem to be making are.
And is this the same for everybody in the program? Like, do you choose teachers who have that same philosophy, or do you try to have a mix of different teachers that teach in different philosophies and different techniques?
I think we have some differences, but for the most part, I think everybody's sort of gravitated around these attitudes, if not principles. They're probably more.
What do they call? Don't they call it like dogma or something like that?
Well, yeah, pedagogy and dogma.
Pedagogy, that's the one. Yeah, yeah,
Right,
that
right, right,
pedagogy. I
right.
hate that word.
Yeah, at the place where I went to graduate school, they called it pedagogy.
Uh-huh.
Pedagogy, but we don't talk about those things in those terms and very often.
It sounds fabulous to not talk about those things. It's like, I mean,
It is a
like,
relief.
my career as a teacher, the bane of my existence was always those pedagogical meetings, and then, of course, just meetings and committees and these kinds
Yeah.
of things that sound like you have less of than your standard school.
Yeah, we do, and I don't know, the as far as the core faculty goes, I think the individual who's newest to the faculty has been on the faculty for, I think, 8 years, maybe? 6 to 8 years, and, so many of these people I've been working with for, close to 20 years. And while we have formal meetings and we do have committees, most of business is done, call them up, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think about what I'm thinking? Maybe we should talk to so and so.
Don't tell the accreditors this.
Yeah, well, we'll have a meeting about it to put, put the
Minutes,
cherry on. Yeah,
I gotta have
but
minutes.
so we can record when exactly, something was put into effect. But all of the conversations, what gets on those meeting agendas has already likely been pretty thoroughly discussed
Oh, yeah.
behind the scenes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's the same as every other committee. We always discuss outside of committee in smaller groups where we can tell our true opinions
right,
before walking into the actual meeting where
right,
things get on the record.
right. Exactly. There you go. But it is collegial environment for the most part. So I think everybody's been pleased with the trajectory of student work and the diversification thereof, and just the caliber of student work and effort and stuff. So
Yes, I have that brought up a great question that I hear about. So when people apply, so let's picture there's a student or a potential
hmm
student listening to this podcast.
hmm
How should they structure their application? I don't even know what your application sort of mandates or anything, but so like, is it a portfolio? Is there any writing? Is there an interview? How does it go?
they usually are referred to me. And I actually will typically work with an individual to develop their applications. So I've, interviewed them. I may ask them to speak to another faculty member as well. Before I started doing this, we would ask for documentation of work. So say we have a rule of thumb, 20 to 24 images for photographers. And photographers would send us, or applicants in photography would send us, here are my two still lifes, here are two portraits, here's a documentary project I've not, a bunch of different things. And the committee would look at this stuff and say, well, who is this person? What really matters to them? How do we know if we can help them if we don't really know what their interests are? So I would work with students to well, actually, beginning the mentoring process at that moment where like, so tell me about you. So tell me what it is that really, you know, you find exhilarating or you are committed to in why are you doing this?
Okay, so but let's picture this though. So like let's take what would be your ideal sort of application. So like if somebody came in with the perfect application for you. So it would be 20 to 24 images of a cohesive series of work, all this plus what? So I mean cuz to a certain extent almost any photographer could create a cohesive body of work. But the question is what makes somebody that much more special?
A unique perspective or what somebody might call a voice. So they also write an essay, and if they can cogently describe the content of their work. This is not to say that it has to be contextualized in art language necessarily, because that maybe that's something that we'd engage
I
with.
was gonna say that would leave you nothing to teach them, yeah,
That's exactly
there has to be some foundation to build on, though.
right. There you go. So if we see in the essay and in the work, this alignment of purpose and expression or voice, that's pretty ideal. And we're not really concerned with educational background in like we don't require that they have so many credits in art and art history and that kind of thing. It's something that we continue to discuss because without that background it's hard for them to engage at least immediately at MFA level, in conversation at MFA level. But on the other hand, if they've had rich, histories as individuals and they can bring those experiences to the MFA program, it enhances, well, things just aren't so insular. I would imagine, I haven't had involvement in a program where everybody comes from a BFA background. But I would imagine if that were the case, we keep hearing the same things and seeing the same things. And
Well, that's like a lot of times they say, like, "Don't go to the same school for your BFA that you do your MFA," because, like, you
right,
wanna have a richer experiences, broader education, this kind of stuff that you won't get if you are basically getting it from the same teachers and in the
yeah,
same location and the same experience, all that.
right. Well, this is even more so. So it's great if we have psychologists and people who have been professors in other fields. It broadens the connections that people are making between art and other areas of thought and practice. And I think it makes for a richer environment, more creative, or at least the possibilities are there. I mean, it is something that we, continue to weigh out the pros and cons because, as I said, people without a background, if you start talking, postmodern theory, you just descended from another planet.
I would imagine it would the beginning would be a bit tough with
Yeah,
the randomness and the arbitrary sort of backgrounds and, experiences of these people to try and come together quickly.
yeah. So again, it's a 3-year program with a lot of individual attention, and it is something that we continue to build. Recognize where we're successful, where we might have weaknesses, how we're going to address those kinds of things. But we also have, that many of them are older. I think they're looking for new meaning in their lives, right? They're transitioning out of roles as, well, professionals and providers for their families and things to, who am I, on, a deeper level. And so there's this inherent commitment. I mean, I'm amazed because very often the students, you ask for something that you think is reasonable, and you get so much more. You say, show me this, and you get a dissertation. And
Well, and which you might not get from a 20, 25-year-old MFA student because they're preoccupied with other things, a lot of them
exactly, but
a lot of them are working full-time jobs to be able to be in school.
yep, and just by virtue of their youthfulness, you're going likely to have a different experience with them. But now that an increasing number of younger people are coming into the program, I think the interaction, it's interesting to watch because their experiences are so different. The perspectives on what they're making are different, and it's not the case that one's superior to another, right? Just because you're older, and often it's helpful anyway to hear different perspectives. So it's just makes it more dynamic. People have expectations. They want to they want their beliefs. They want affirmation about their beliefs, and that kind of model is limited. As much as people want to be told, they're doing good work. a it's much more interesting to have a conversation that a consuming conversation about all these.
My most memorable critique out of 8 years of higher education was when my teacher walked in, he looked at my work, and he goes, "I really like this work, but that's not what we're here to talk about." And
Right.
then he just ripped me a new one for, like, 2 hours, just
Yeah.
told me everything that I did wrong with it. That was my most memorable one, like,
Yeah, well,
I mean,
I can see why, for better or worse.
well, I mean, like, to a certain extent, a teacher who is just basically saying, like, "You do good work," is not helpful. Like,
No.
that just
Not in
patting on
and
the
of
back.
itself. No, that
Mm.
that isn't that's really what I'm saying. I agree with you 100%. I mean, I think often the quality of the work is tied to the level of engagement. The degree to which, a student is engaged with the work, with engaged with the background knowledge about the work, just engaged. And if in critique or in the mentoring process others are engaged as well, everybody benefits. So what I'm saying is, everybody goes into a critique saying, wishing that we would say it's got a good beat, I can dance to it, I give it a 10. That's not a good critique. A good critique, so the faculty would talk to a student about their work, and they would say, have you ever seen this? Did you read that? And earlier, some years ago, I would get evaluations of those critiques from the students, and they'd say, the teachers are just trying to show off what they know, because they're like, will you tell me if it's good or not? And good is so relative. It depends who you ask. It depends what year we're in. you know, who knows? But the main thing is, like, is art is something to talk about, and how are we talking about it, and how passionate are we about what we're experiencing?
Okay, to bring this back to the schooling part, do you all do the standard grades?
No,
Something told me you didn't.
no, written evaluations.
Okay, but pass fail?
Yeah, it's predominantly pass fail. So we have comprehensive reviews.
Don't get me wrong, just to be clear, my master's program was pass fail. My
Right.
undergraduate program and all the undergraduate programs I've taught in, of course, have grades, which I hate doing
Yeah,
because,
yeah. No, I
like, it's
did
either
I
you
did
make
too.
good work or you don't. Like, there's
Yeah.
no A-level work is subjective in the arts versus, like,
Yeah, it's not
passing.
very meaningful. When I was teaching at Lafayette, the students were, the faculty would call them professional students, because they were there to succeed at being students, right?
Well, they also didn't wanna graduate and pay their student loans back, so they would continually take classes.
Well, at Lafayette, they were very concerned with grades. And the first thing they would ask me is, what do I have to do to get an A? They wanted me to lay out like, right? And I said, well, if I tell you you're going to do just that, nothing else, and nothing more, and why do you want it? Why do you want? Why would I want that to be the outcome here? So I refused to tell them, and they were very agitated.
Oh, I recently had a student that got an A, I gave him a 92%, and he wanted to know what he could do to get 100%.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
like, "You can't do
That's the wrong
anything,
question.
well, but there's nothing you can do. That's it. Like, you do good work. You have the highest grade in the class. That's it, but you're
Well,
not perfect, so you will not get 100%." I hate the entitlement of the younger generation that believe that by just turning in work, they believe that they should receive an A for simply accomplishing the work.
at the time, this is like 20 years ago. I spoke to the students, and there's a dark side to it because their sense of self, of well-being, is so critically tied to those grades.
But it shouldn't be in the arts.
Lafayette is a liberal arts college, so most of the people, even the art majors, are the kind of students who typically performed well academically. But well, no, I'm with you. I was the one that, like, I'm not going to tell you, and they were really upset. So I said, look, if you show up, if you do your best, and I can tell when somebody's committed and when they're faking it, you won't get lower than a B minus in this class. And I thought that was a pretty fair deal.
I think that's amazingly fair.
But to them, B minus was tantamount to an F. So eventually, the chair of the department, who also happened to be a friend of mine, said, like, Howard, you know, you have to tell them their grades. You have to tell them, like, if they're, like, working at A level or B level or that sort of
Oh, I
thing.
when I
It's
started teaching,
painful for me.
I remember being a young teacher, and when I started teaching, I used to stand up. I had this whole lecture that I gave the first day of class, which was basically, "At this moment, you are all failing my class. Now prove to me you deserve a better grade."
Wow, you were the gladiator in there.
I've softened in my years, but, like, that's how I started it, and you know what, the honest truth is when I, like, made threw down the gauntlet like that on them, they generally stepped up.
Yeah. Well, what I was describing before, because the profile of our student is typically they're transferring from one phase of life to the next. They're just like they can't get enough. They want as much as you. They're like sponges.
Oh, yeah, adult learners are the best because they've made a conscious choice to put the time, energy, and money into a passion that they absolutely want to know everything about.
Right. There you go. And this is not to say that the younger students aren't impacted by that either. They see it and they participate. I think some of the other students were like, this person is young enough to be my kid. Right, right. So there was a little concern about that. But it seems to me anyway, in no time, they've adapted in surprisingly pleasant and mutually supportive ways. I think it's pretty fabulous. I mean, I feel lucky to be at this school in the position that I am in, doing something that is meaningful to me, and with extraordinary colleagues and students. So
It sounds great.
Yeah, it is.
When I was young, I remember being at the Corcoran, and we used to get the catalog from Maine Photographic Workshop and the Anderson Ranch. Those were sort of the
Yeah.
2 prominent workshop places in the world, and to this day, I still have the desire, and dropping my name here, like, that I would love to run workshops at both of those 2 places.
Yeah. Well, so you need to make a proposal,
Well,
Matthew.
that's something I'm so bad at, like, so yeah, I'm fully aware
It
because
doesn't
actually
have now you don't have to worry about writing a syllabus.
right.
A description is a good place to start, and
I'm fully aware actually because a friend of mine who actually was a guest on the podcast a couple episodes ago actually used to teach at Maine Photographic Workshops, and so she actually was nice enough to tell me some of the tips about how she was able to get to running workshops there, so, yeah.
yeah. So I mean, we're nice people.
But
And-
but you all are I mean, nothing personal, but, like, you all are very intimidating. I mean, to me, maybe I'm odd, maybe I'm the norm, I don't know, but, the main workshops are still, like, the best of the best as far as I'm concerned. That's one of the top, photographic workshops in the world.
well, I believe that's true. um, but we're also pretty humble about it, and I don't think you should feel daunted by any of that.
Alright, I'll write a workshop then.
Okay, good. An element of our mission is that we're dedicated to lifelong learning. So this is also different than other schools where you enter a program, you finish the program, and you leave. We actively try to program in such a way that people can intersect with us throughout their lives. We have what we call young artist program. We have workshops that are designed for professionals, more technical and to advance their careers.
Portfolio building, that kinda stuff, yeah,
Well, and a lot of tech things. People want to be professional film editors, cinematographers.
and book production.
We have the book arts and writing. So MFA certificate programs. The student I referred to earlier, who was transitioning from photojournalism to social practice, did a certificate program here, like over 20 years ago,
Wow,
and returned. And so a number of students do multiple programs. A lot of MFA graduates are teaching workshops. So they come back as students and teachers. Some of them,
nice.
sometimes teachers in one workshop taking. So one of our faculty in film, a notable cinematographer. What was he taking? I want to say it was a screenwriting class. So he's teaching cinematography and also taking screenwriting. I mean, it's different that people are not thinking that they're doing a program. They're engaging with a community, and that community is available to them in many different ways
And
throughout
throughout their
their
life.
lives.
Yeah, nice. Alright, well, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, it was nice talking to you. Get that proposal in.
I will actually work on that.